It's a nutrition.
Oh, okay.
It's Aloha Monday, big race on Saturday. Woo! Breakfast with Bob
and Poncho Man. We are wrapping up day one of Breakfast with Bob. My name is Bob Babbitt. We are brought to you by EAS, Myoplex, Hoka One One, Polar Velo Fix. Every one of our athletes is receiving a certificate for Velo Fix. Norma Tech, Four Seasons Hualalai, and MEO Power Breather. Our next guest, Annabel Luxford from Australia. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me, although I thought it was breakfast.
We got breakfast. Oh, they cleared it out, buy you lunch. Gosh. It is. It's 1 o'clock.
I haven't eaten all day.
What the heck?
I've been waiting for
You've been waiting for a buffet.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We'll take care of you.
Okay.
Not a problem. Anybody who's had to fight off a magpie, I think, explain to me what the heck happened with the magpie.
Well, I mean, I don't think you'd be familiar with a magpie if you're not Australian, or I'm not sure if they're New Zealand, but...
Do you have them there? Yeah. Okay, we got it. Okay, New Zealand.
Okay, so they're in New Zealand. They're not a bird of prey or anything. They're not sort of much bigger than a pigeon. Maybe no bigger than a pigeon. But during spring, they're quite territorial of their young. So they will swoop you, and they love bike riders. And, you know, I was doing my last long ride. It was about 40 degrees, so it was perfect Kona Preparation in Queensland. And I rode into magpie territory, and it just was unrelenting, and I couldn't get away. So I ended up using my bike to sort of try and shield it.
So wait, so you picked up the bike and they were attacking you?
One.
It's like
one was attacking
There's only
me.
one. It was one, and they're the size of a pigeon.
Yes.
And you're using your bike.
It sounds
a little overkill. A little overkill.
Sounds like a little over the top, but it's not. Anyone who's experienced it, they can be quite terrifying.
I've seen the New Zealanders are nodding, and they don't agree with Australians very often. So the fact that they're going along means it must be true.
Yes.
So growing up, triathlon, when did that come into the picture for you?
I mean, I've been doing triathlon for a very long time. I started doing them in high school.
Okay.
Over the summer months, I always swam and ran cross country. So most kids have a bike, and
it became part of the game.
Yeah, it became part of what I did, and Australia's got a really sort of strong junior scene, and that was a fantastic environment to grow up doing the sport. And equally at that time, sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s, Australia's ITU elite women were the best in the world.
Emmy Carney,
Loretta Harrop, Jackie Fairweather, Gallagher. So, I mean, you always had people to look up to and people to strive to, reach their level. So it was a fantastic environment to grow up and be a triathlete in.
And you raced ITU for 10 years.
I didn't know it was 10 years, but that does sound about right. I did it for a long time, yes.
Under 23 world champion. And when did you make the transition from... and that whole Olympic pursuit is so hard because the fields are so deep. With the draft legal, you're coming off the bike with 20, 30 other women. And the races, it's not necessarily the best on the day, but the best person in the right position. It's hard stuff.
Definitely, ITU is very tactical, and I did it for a number of years, and I saw the sport change a lot during that time. Probably when I got into it, there were some very strong swimmers. I mean, Barb Lindquist and Sheila Tarmina, Olympic swimmers, Loretta Harrop, Nicole Hackett. So they really set up the races that it was dominated by strong swim bikers, and obviously you had to run well, but it didn't come down to just a running race. And by the time I left the sport, it really was just a running race. And unfortunately, I got injured easily with a lot of speed work.
Yes.
And I wasn't as competitive as I'd like to be, and felt like I wasn't using my strengths. So that's when I decided to make the switch across to, long course racing. But I do miss that, the adrenaline of ITU racing. Yeah, definitely.
To go all out for 2 hours is...
Yeah, and I mean, it's not even the all out, but just the fact that so many different things can happen in the race. And whilst sometimes it's disappointing that you're not in control of the race as much as you are in long course racing, that's also an element that is exciting, that you're not in control of it.
When did you make the transition to long course?
I stopped racing ITU in 2011 and dabbled in 2012 in some non-drafting Olympic distance racing. Mm-hmm. Back when the Lifetime series was...
the Toyota Cup, yes.
The Toyota Cup. And then in 2013, I started racing half Ironmans.
Well, and 5 podiums, 70.3 podiums in 13, and third at 70.3 Worlds?
Yeah, so I mean, that was really exciting my first year. I guess I adapted to the half Ironman racing quite well. It's not too dissimilar, I think, to Olympic distance training.
Right.
So I think that helped me. I haven't found the transition to Ironman as smooth.
There's a lot more nutrition involved and a lot more, just
Yeah,
the strategy
definitely.
is different.
It is a very different strategy, and there's a lot of sort of elements that come into play on race day that are not things that you can necessarily practice in training.
Right.
And you can't race Ironmans sort of every month. That you could race a half Ironman every month, and so I've found that the learning has been slower just because the opportunity for racing isn't there.
Oh, there isn't there.
Well, it's not there because I can't race an Ironman every month.
Oh, right.
I mean, maybe some people can.
But what's been fascinating to me is when some of these guys have done, they'll do 6, 7, 8, 70.3 races in a year.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that many in a year, and
Really?
probably this year we'll do that many, yeah.
That's a lot of half marathons.
It is, and when I first started racing, it took me sort of 2 weeks to recover from a half marathon, and now sort of I'll be back doing a jog sort of 2 days later.
Really?
So it is amazing how much your body learns and adapts, but yeah, an Ironman, that's still a totally different ball game to a half Ironman.
So 2 years ago, first Kona, right? Worried about the crosswinds. I think you're third out of the water, but you got 12th, first time out.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty happy with 12th. I think sort of I was happy to just finish that day. Definitely, I wasn't really prepared for how hard it would be. I'd been living in Melbourne and training there over winter.
Yes.
And that's quite different to, obviously, the climate here in Kona. So, yeah, I was really pleased to get through that day, and I did learn a lot. And whilst I sort of hated it, I also loved it. I loved the challenge, and it did make me want to come back and do it again and, I guess, yeah, improve my Ironmans.
So this year, you won 2017 Euro, the 70.3 champs, right? And second at Ironman Nice. So obviously you're catching on to this Ironman thing.
Yeah, I feel like I've started 6 Ironmans and finished 5, and I felt like Nice was the first one that across the board I sort of raced well. I've really struggled in the marathons in the others.
Sure.
So I learned a lot from that one, and also it was nice. I found the Ironman really daunting.
As you should.
Yes, you should find an Ironman daunting. But I think lining up at Kona this year for the first time in my Ironman journey, I feel that I can do this, and yes, it is hard, but I can do this.
Right, and you feel like you belong.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. The marathon had really eluded me. I mean, I knew from the times that I could run in a half marathon that I should be running a much quicker marathon than I'd been running, but I just hadn't been able to put it all together. And a few things have changed. I certainly wasn't doing enough running and training to run a decent marathon at the sort of after 6 hours of exercising. So that was always a balancing act for me. I've been easily injured, so I needed to balance making sure that I got to the start line, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great you're running if you can't get to the start line. But also do enough running that my legs were sort of sturdy enough to complete a marathon. And I've just learnt pacing and nutrition, learnt more about that.
Exactly. So last year you had to pull out during a run. And when you said heart arrhythmia, that type of stuff scares the hell out of me. And,
yeah.
And that, I imagine that you were pretty freaked.
Yes, I mean, heart arrhythmia is a really scary thing. People should be afraid of it. And heart problems in endurance athletes is a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Fortunately, I saw a very good cardiologist and had some testing done, and mine's sort of benign. Well, not sort of, it is benign. I've been told that it's nothing to worry about, and it happens so sporadically, and it's very infrequent. So I'd never had it in a race. It was something I got a couple of times a year. So I haven't had it since then in a race, maybe once in training. I've learnt that I'm not a danger, but I mean, it is something that I'll always, stay on top of and get regular heart checks. I think most people doing this sport should be doing that.
What are your goals for Saturday?
I mean, I know it sounds cliche and everyone always says, oh, I'm focused on the process and not an outcome. But
Never heard that before.
But really, that's what I am trying to focus on. I mean, there's a bunch of brilliant athletes here. I have no idea what they're going to be doing. All I really can do is, I guess, put together the best race I can. And I'm happy with my form. I'm happy that I've come in sort of uninjured and relatively healthy.
That's huge.
So really, swimming the best I can. I'm not going to, making sure I ride smart, and being really aware of what's going on with the other athletes around me. I mean, Kona's become incredibly more tactical in the women's racing. You notice sort of women riding in, I mean, legally, but yeah, they're riding in bunches these days.
They are. And it's become very tactical.
It has. Right? It's probably become a little more like the men's race. Yeah, not getting caught up in someone else's race plan. And then, staying calm on the run and really just breaking it down into, I think the thing that helped me in Nice, I broke the run down into segments, which I sort of hadn't focused on before, and it made it a lot less daunting. So just putting together a good race across all three.
So, I mean, the transition from ITU to 70.3 seemed pretty seamless for you. 5 podiums first time out. The transition to this is harder because it's not like you can do it as often. Like you said, if you do 3 a year, that's a lot. And it's hard to get that how to race that well if you're not doing it that often.
Yeah, definitely. So I think this will be my 3rd Ironman this year. I did race Ironman New Zealand in March, and I struggled sort of at about the 28K in the run.
Yeah.
So made changes, as I mentioned earlier. So I guess it really has been about making sure I start the Ironman in a good position, get to race day in a good position to give myself the best chance possible, but also making sure during the race I make good decisions as well.
Love it. Annabel, thanks so much for taking time. I hear some magpies above us, by the way. They're like pretty loud here.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they haven't migrated over here from Australia. They're menaces, so yeah.
Have a great race on Saturday. So nice to get to meet you.
Thank you, Bob.
Poncho Man, bring us out on day 1 of Breakfast with Bob.
It's Aloha Monday, we'll be back tomorrow. Breakfast with Bob.
And Poncho Man, that is a wrap from beautiful Huggles on the Rocks. See you all tomorrow. Aloha.